Посол Kabulov, очень приятно вам встретить в Москву, разговаривать с вами. Мы знаем, you're very busy, but thank you for your time. You are so very experienced in the region and especially with relation to Afghanistan. Russia has been, over the last year or so, even more proactive when it comes to the peace process and the situation in Afghanistan. Could you elaborate a little bit more on what Russia's policy is?
Thank you very much. First of all, большое спасибо for this interview and this opportunity to talk to on Indian TV. As for Russia's strategic interest in Afghanistan, to have a peaceful and independent, neutral Afghanistan free of terrorism and drugs. That's a strategic interest, and whatever we are doing is aimed to achieving to this goal. So we are trying our best. Yes, Russia is proactive now because it's dull to be idle.
Especially in times like this. Pasol, the Taliban delegation led by Mullah Baradar, soon after President Trump announced that the talks were at a dead end, they seem to be, of course, having a fresh lease of life now, came straight to Moscow first. They went to China and Iran later. What can you share with us what was discussed?
First of all, to be precise, it was his deputy, Mr. Stanverzai, who visited.
It was Baradar who went to China.
Now is in China, and he is
Iran, now in Islamabad.
Pakistan. No, Baradar also didn't go to Iran. Different Taliban rep went there. So we predominantly, first of all, Taliban briefed us about their talks with Americans and shared their opinion and view about the reason behind that Americans abruptly stopped these negotiations. They told us that they managed to completely agree on the text of the future bilateral agreement, and it was ready to be signed precisely on 13th of September. But all of a sudden, because of these events, Americans stopped the process. But Taliban came to us to brief and to announce that they're still ready to resume talks and to finalize the agreement. If not, if Americans choose war, they're ready for war. That was, in a nutshell, their message.
So did Stanverzai then, who apparently has also been trained in India before his stint with the Taliban?
Yeah, I heard, yeah.
Did they say that a ceasefire had been agreed to, or at least a sequencing towards a ceasefire?
Yes. They said, and by the way, my American colleague, Ambassador Zalmay Khalilzad, confirmed later. They agreed that ceasefire will be announced immediately on the event of signing of the agreement. So it was supposed to start on 20th of September. And so their point was that is abnormal that American blamed Taliban for attacking American soldier and killing American soldier because there was no ceasefire by that moment. And besides, Taliban, 3 days before this killing, they also ambushed a different American convoy, killing 2 more Americans, and nobody reacted. But all of a sudden, these were took so highly. And besides, they said that Taliban fighters were on the permanent attack by both American government forces, losing loads also there in Afghanistan. And they didn't protest it and didn't took it as a pretext to stop the negotiations. Therefore, they requested us to do whatever we can in order to facilitate resumption of the talks.
The ceasefire was only against the Americans, or would it be a ceasefire?
Exactly, good question. Yes, it was agreed that ceasefire with Americans and coalition forces will start on 13, immediately after conclusion of the agreement, and it was supposed and fixed in the text that in 10 days' time, Taliban will start inter-Afghan talks, and it was believed that with start of inter-Afghan talks, there's a strong possibility for ceasefire with the government forces.
Anyway, things have progressed since then. Mullah Baradar is leading
Yes.
a delegation in Pakistan. They've already met Shah Mehmood,
Yes.
Qureshi, the ISA chief, Imran Khan. Dr. Khalilzad is also in Islamabad.
Right.
He's a good friend of yours. And if the Taliban have asked Russia and you personally to try and intervene to get talks restarted, is that what you are doing?
Actually, Taliban asked me to do
Correct.
so, and I did it. When I met Ambassador Khalilzad recently in New York on the silent of General
UN.
Assembly, we discussed this issue, and I was really satisfied to find out Mr. Khalilzad, both his team, to be inclined to resume the talks. So it is an interesting situation when both sides want to talk to each other and they need something to help them. So we are ready to do our best, and we already did it. We shared some ideas. We had discussed before with Ambassador Khalilzad, with the Taliban, Mullah Baradar personally. Now they're thinking about it, and Mullah Baradar promised to respond lately, but now we know he is now in Islamabad. I believe it's a good sign, and it's always better for both American and Taliban delegates to talk to each other directly and come to terms.
So let me again get this clear. You do believe that both the Americans and the Taliban we know, want to restart talks, but they're looking for something that would let them do that?
I certainly do, sir.
And you are helping in that, or you would like
I'm
to help?
helping to it to happen as soon as possible.
But it would seem strange when President Trump, like you said, has stopped talks because of one soldier being killed when so many other soldiers had been killed before and after, and Afghans were being killed as well. What would he need to restart those talks and be able to tell both the American public and the world that something has changed?
There were a lot of speculations around the reason behind this move by President Trump. I'm not going to go into speculations, but I believe that President Trump and American side really wants to sort of reassurance from Taliban side about their readiness, real readiness, not only to ceasefire, but reduction of violence. So I don't see a big problem in it, and hope the Taliban also can meet these requests by their American interlocutors.
Basol, considering what US-Russia relations are, it's pretty incredible, and it goes to your credit, I would presume, that America wants Russia's help in this particular case, at least.
Well, credit should go to Afghanistan and to Taliban. I think so.
But now that things have changed since what President Trump did, and things are changing even as we speak, elections have been held. Of course, that's the whole process of counting and the complaints and what will really happen. How does that affect the peace process?
Well, I don't think that it affected the peace process sensibly, but the problem, there are several problems. If we take elections as a whole, Taliban beforehand already announced that under these circumstances, when they believe their country is occupied by foreign forces, no elections can be legitimate, at first. Second, the elections itself, quality of elections, quality from my point was very low, and those who are monitoring objectively situation, they say about low turnout. Understandably, insecurity, technical and other problems did it. And when we see attendance, turnout at the level of 20 or so percent, it's very difficult to recognize such elections to be representatives. And this brings more problem. Besides, as you are well aware, participants, candidates already challenging fairness of these elections. In a nutshell, in the bottom line is that if Afghans, those who participate in the election, didn't recognize it to be a free and fair legitimacy of such election, an outcome will be marred. And it will not help. Therefore, I'm on the side of those who believe that it would have been more reasonable and prudent first to get peace and then to launch electoral process. Nevertheless, we cannot change it now. We will have to deal with what we already get. But of course, as you rightly mentioned, that we now waiting for official outcome of elections. But I can easily, like many other people, predict that we cannot avoid scandals.
Even if it is 20%, even if it is 2.5 million of the 9.76 million registered voters, at least they did vote. What if one of the candidates emerges as a victor in the first round itself? Does that give that person and the government that they represent any legitimacy in peace talks?
First of all, these 2.5 million voters already has been challenged by many knowledgeable people. It's one. Second, as I said before, I don't believe that any outcome of victory of one candidate in first round will be accepted by others. And many people put their finger towards current president of Afghanistan, that he's manipulating resources and other things. You can read everything what they say about. It by itself demonstrates that in my environment around the elections is not healthy, and understandably unhealthy, because people doesn't trust each other, doesn't trust authorities, since they have big experience of manipulation. If you recall the latest elections 5 years ago, official figures of final second round never was announced.
The Americans stepped in there, but there's no John Kerry this time.
What kind of democracy is it? So that's why Afghan people has all legitimate right to suspect that it may be again this bad example of democratic process, which is of course doesn't encourage a lot. But you see, elections is important, but peace is more important. And in the end, it is not that elections decide. It will be different process in Afghanistan after elections to bring this peace. This is inevitable, but it's a time-consuming process.
So who will the Taliban be talking to when there are intra-Afghan talks, if and when they resume?
At the moment, they believe that they are ready to talk to a representative Afghan delegation, which may include elements of Kabul government. At least they say this way. Of course, it should be seen how it will work, but in order to get to this point, we should have American Taliban agreement to be concluded first, and then it will be a really starting point for long voyage toward peace in Afghanistan.
Ambassador, in your view, Pakistan's role, first of all, in safe havens, supporting, financing of Taliban and other groups, and now facilitating those talks?
Well, that Pakistan is facilitating is already constructive role. And we very much encourage them to do so further. And even now, as we already mentioned, Taliban and Khalilzad are in Islamabad. And if Pakistan can help two sides to get the bridge between two sides, it will be helpful. It's indicative for that Pakistan is trying to do its best. And but we should not forget that. As we did it is a Moscow format consultations of regional states, where both India and Pakistan are members. Pakistan recognizes the role of regional approach. It is not only Pakistani approach. They have to take into account position of other regional partners, including us and Iran and other immediate neighbors of Afghanistan. So we very much hopeful, and we wish Pakistan to do this as much as possible.
Your position on the fact that at the very least, Pakistan influences, if not controls, the Taliban and other terrorist groups. Mullah Baradar was in jail in Pakistan for 10 to 12 years.
Right.
He's now going and hugging the Pakistani establishment. What is that indicative of?
It means that life is going on. And of course, there may be bitter rememberings about different things, but since Mullah Baradar does it, it shows that he is trying to act as a responsible representative of his Taliban movement.
You're talking about the Moscow process again, and we had two unofficial observers, very experienced diplomats. One was ex-ambassador.
But still unofficial.
Yes, exactly what I was getting to. One an ex-ambassador to Afghanistan, one an ex-ambassador to Pakistan. Where do you see India's role as a regional power in this whole process? Should we up our game? Should we be involved more? Because you yourself said, why unofficial?
Well, first of all, it is not our fault that it was unofficial,
exactly,
because we invited India as a full-fledged and legitimately important key player in the region, and still doing that. And it's up to India to decide on that. Although we respect any decision, but again, it's for India to decide whether it's going to be in the group of decision making, which is important for the whole region or not. Simple like that. Those who wanted, they were present and they were active. But besides, a Moscow process is still there, but we launched with Americans and Chinese something sort of new format, which is actually in essence same. We just wanted to have it as a smaller group at a starting point. And it was agreed that at this stage, and this group is prime goal is to facilitate political process, national reconciliation process. When this aim is reached in that sense, that intra-Afghan talks started, after that, we decided to enlarge this group because we will have to decide on ways helping Afghan government and the nation in economic rehabilitation. In that capacity, we suggested and others agreed that India should join this group as well as some other important states.
There's a view that the Taliban coming to Moscow, going to China, going to Iran, earlier they were in Uzbekistan, they were in Indonesia,
right.
That countries are giving them legitimacy. A group that was looked at as a terrorist group is being given international legitimacy, whereas the Afghan government, which had been elected, whatever the flaws in the process, were not involved at all. So it was like the Taliban was actually the state, and the state was trying to get into talks with the Taliban. Your views on that?
First of all, it is not Taliban troops that gave them legitimacy. Taliban got this legitimacy on the battlefield of Afghanistan, fighting against international foreign forces and Kabul government. And it's a fault of Kabul government that it failed to have an upper hand. Simple like that. Legitimacy for Taliban comes from here, and we are pragmatic and practical people. We know that without talking to Taliban, no peace will come in Afghanistan. But for that, we need to invite them. We need to talk to them. We cannot do it going somewhere in hideouts. So we are bringing to our capitals in order to have this opportunity.
And in your reading with your meetings with Ambassador Khalilzad, what is it that the Americans are looking at in terms of, we know it's a withdrawal, but is it going to be an immediate withdrawal? Is it going to be scheduled? Is it going to be conditional on the talks?
No, it will be phased withdrawal and conditional, of course, because both sides, of course, I haven't seen the draft of the agreement, but it was elaborated, explained by both sides. So I have an idea. I can speak in these terms. They're speaking about phased withdrawal of American and other foreign forces from Afghanistan. And within this time frame of withdrawal, there will be other steps committed by Taliban related to governance, security, ceasefire, of course, in the very beginning, because it's a nation-building process. And it's important that nation-building in Afghanistan is conducted by Afghans themselves and as a Taliban as a part. As for terrorists and Taliban, indeed, we believed in the years of Osama bin Laden presence in Afghanistan, we also view Taliban as a terrorist force. But they've learned their lessons. We understood it. And the bulk of the Taliban movement, they has become a national, yes, military, political opposition, but national force with domestic agenda.
So you think they've changed not only on that front, understanding the international context, but even domestically, they won't be like they were in 1996?
No, they were, at least they say so at the high leadership level. And you see, they're not monsters, they're human beings. And they don't want to sacrifice their life year after year. They want to get an honorable comeback, let me say, not a physical comeback to Afghanistan, but the social, political life of Afghanistan. And we discussed many times about those speculations that Taliban has a hidden agenda about restoring monopoly of their power. We made our point strongly that we will not accept this, never. And they committed that day. No, they've learned their lessons, no, but they want to be in power sharing process through democratic institutions and
they
ways.
will take part in elections?
Yes, yeah, it's next step. And it was supposed that they will discuss, and I cannot preempt, of course. What they are going to agree upon, but since they are ready to discuss such issues in governance framework like elections, it by itself undermines suspicions about their desire to restore Islamic Emirate of Afghanistan. Because Islamic Emirate, it means theological monarchy. So if Taliban accept this, it's by itself positive step, and of course saying and signing is one thing, but doing is different. Therefore, it is important for international community not only monitor but push both Taliban and other side to honor.
Pasul, there's also a worry that if there is an agreement, and we're saying there is a lot of difference between agreeing and actually signing, when it does happen, that if Taliban or the groups that are now being talked about, the members of the group, join governance structures, however it happens, there will be others who will be totally disgruntled and could possibly join something that Russia and the whole world are worried about, that is Daesh or ISIS or ISKP.
Right. I don't completely rule out such a possibility. We know that Taliban movement is not ideologically and politically homogeneous. Part of the Taliban, they still follow radical views, but they're not majority. The bulk of the Taliban leadership inclined to make peace and to end the war through political means. That's important. As for those who don't want, of course, they may sabotage or try to sabotage. But just if, imagine if Afghan government, whatever, future Afghan government and Taliban agree on peace, it will be their common business and endeavor to cope with others. And we lay our hope on that.
Sabotaging the process, again, there are many analysts and experts who say that it could be Pakistan who is also behind that. If they cannot control the Taliban, who make an agreement with the US and then with the Afghans, they still need to either create chaos in Afghanistan or try and control.
I don't share. I don't share because there's a controversy. The same people claim that Pakistan control Taliban, and if they control, they can do everything. So it means that they are not in control of Taliban, and at great expense, Taliban are independent from Pakistan. Is one. Second, it is not in the interest of Pakistan, as their leadership and Prime Minister recently, Foreign Minister announced. And it's true, we always said the same thing. It's not in the interest of Pakistan that war in Afghanistan continues because it backlashed already to Pakistan. So we have to buy it at face value.
Ambassador, you've had so much of experience, like I said in the beginning, in the area and especially in Afghanistan. The report said at one point of time you even headed the KGB station in Kabul, and of course you
No, it's wrong.
It's wrong.
American rumors.
On record, you've said it's wrong, but you've worked yourself up through the embassy. You've been an ambassador in Kabul. You're special representative for President Putin now. Just some memories going back, because there were reports that when a Russian plane had accidentally landed in Kandahar, you were involved in negotiations with the Taliban and even met Mullah Omar?
Right, I did.
Some memories of that?
Yeah, I have a lot of memories which I can share, and some of them I can't. But I got first-hand initial experience and knowledge of the Taliban. But I can compare those old initial Taliban, the current one. There is a big difference between them. They now know much more about themselves and about the world. That's why they have changed in positive sense of this word. But for me, it was, of course, exciting exercise. We negotiated for quite a long time, and it didn't yield result. But then Almighty helped the issue to be resolved in a different manner.
Ambassador Kabulov, очень приятно с вами разговаривать. I hope we'll do this many times more.
Thank you very much, sir. My pleasure.
Большое спасибо.
Thank you.